Okay, this video is going to be the disassembly of the portable steam cleaner Shark SC-505. I wasn't able to find anything online about how to disassemble this, and I decided to show you what I've done. Now, this is completely disassembled. This unit probably won't be any good, but I won't know for sure until I put it back together. The original problem that I was having with it was simply that I couldn't get the cap off it. Okay, this cap sits on the top. And this is a very common problem, not being able to get the cap off. That's one of the primary reasons for junking this whole thing is you can't get the top off, or you break it trying to get the top off. So the first thing to realize that I was able to get in one of the online reviews is it's possible to pop off the black plastic part. You don't have to break it trying to open it. You will break it if you simply try to open it using the leverage from the plastic because it's very weak. So once you pop that off, what you'll find is this is what's underneath, this white. But it'll be screwed in, and you won't be able to get it out because it's corroded in there, okay? Now, the first thing that I was able to do, also following some hints, I think, from what I found online, was I was able to use an Allen key to remove a portion of this. There's a portion of this inside here, which is actually part of some type of pressure relief. Okay, now to get this out does require a certain amount of modification to this white plastic top. Okay, this white plastic top normally wouldn't allow this to come out because the diameter of the opening is less than the diameter of this adjustment. However, just by working away and enlarging this opening in the plastic, this will come out, and it doesn't, that's not an important feature. So once that comes out, you'll see that how this pressure relief probably works is that when the pressure inside is enough, it pushes this up, the spring, and that creates an opening for steam to release through this hole. Okay. Now, the reason why I wanted to get that out was that I would then be able to access the interior of the steam cleaner, because I could actually empty or refill it through here rather than the normal way, which would be to unscrew the top. And now, it wasn't my intention to operate the Shark that way, because I actually only wanted to access this so that I could pour some type of solvent inside, because my thought is that these threads are probably corroded, and if I could get solvent on the threads from the inside, it will be more effective than just spraying it on the outside, which of course I did that too. I used my PB blaster on the outside, but on the inside, when I looked inside it, I could see that there was a tremendous amount of buildup of calcium or some other type of mineral deposit. If you use distilled water, you won't get that buildup, but you might get tired of putting distilled water in the steam cleaner because you're using a lot. So that white mineral buildup could possibly have been what was causing this to block. So I figured, okay, I'm going to put vinegar in there. I'm going to let it soak upside down, right side up for a week or so. Just let it sit in there. Let it shake it out, and then repeatedly try to remove the top I did that for a couple of weeks because I wasn't in any particular hurry. Then I tried using the CLR just because I thought it might be a little bit more heavy duty than the vinegar. I let that soak. Now, once this pressure relief is out, you can actually put a bar through here and use that as leverage to turn this. Now, in doing so, your grip, in doing so, at this point, I had not disassembled the rest of the shark, so this was all encased with plastic. Now, when it's encased in plastic, your grip on this is not fantastic. You're holding it by the handle or the plastic parts, and if you're trying to unscrew this, it'll get to the point where it feels like something's going to break, and it's probably going to be the plastic part that you're going to snap off. So I was patient with it, and at a certain point, I did begin disassembling the rest of it. And that was a point at which the whole rest of it might have actually potentially got damaged. So I went ahead and completely disassembled to see what was going on. So what happened was, when I originally found it, I couldn't get the top off. Inside there was liquid water that had been sitting there probably for a couple of years, and I was able to operate the shark. It was working fine, and I could get spray coming out. But I knew that once I used up what was in there, I would be able to stop using it because I couldn't get more in. Then I discovered that I could actually refill it through here, but only very tediously. And at that point, my intention was to fix the shark. Now, when I had started adding vinegar or the CLR, my thought was, I'm going to clean this thing out. I'm going to get the top off. I'm going to use it as normal. And when I had the vinegar and the CLR in there, I also would turn it on because my thought was that if it was hot, that would help to eliminate the buildup of the minerals. And then when it was hot and I was using it and then spraying out the vinegar, because remember now, vinegar is mostly water. It's, it's 5% acetic acid or something like that. So mostly it's just water, and the idea would be that if I just repeatedly did that, the calcium buildup, I might be able to dissolve it and get it to come out. And when I was operating it, I did notice that what was coming out did have the white buildup in it. Fortunately, it didn't seem to clog up the nozzle. But at a certain point, while I was actually doing this, it stopped working completely. And honestly, I'm not sure exactly why. And I'm not going to get too much into that in this video because mostly I'm really trying to help you only to how to disassemble it. Now, if I had stuck with this, now it turned out that after it had stopped working, I then started disassembling the rest of it. And at that point, when I got it almost completely disassembled, I might have had this plastic cover off, and I knew that it wasn't working, and it probably wasn't going to continue to ever work again, although I'm not completely given up on it yet. I did possibly use more force on this than I had previously used, and the reason was, I think, because after I had removed, I did notice, okay, so part of the assembly is this rubber gasket, okay, and that fits in the way that this goes. It would fit under the cap. Like this. It would fit in this position. Okay, the cap would go onto that. Now, when this is on, you have very poor visibility on the junction between the cap and the base. But it turns out that this rubber is soft and pliable enough that I was actually able to remove the rubber even by stretching it out over the cap, even without taking the cap off. And I didn't do any damage to that gasket at all. I'm not going to do it right now because I need both hands to do it. Okay, after I got that off, even while I maybe still had the plastic cover on the thing, I was able to see this point here, a good view of this metal and the metal, the brass or copper metal of the top piece. And I couldn't actually notice that when I was applying force through this hole, and the thing was at the near breaking point, I could actually detect that there was a very slight motion in the top. Okay, and that was the key to me saying, okay, this will come off. It's not going to break because I could see this was starting to move. And once you see something like that starting to move, I still had to use a very large amount of force, even to get it to inch forward, small amounts. But I was more confident, and plus, like I said, at that point it wasn't even working, so I wasn't about to worry about it tremendously. At that point, I was able to get this off. It does have a rubber gasket kind of built into it, okay? Once that's off, I was able to get a slightly better view on the inside because this hole is much bigger than the other one, and I could kind of see what was going on. So if your problem is that this is stuck, my first recommendation is try not to disassemble the rest of it, and try to just disassemble the top. And I would use the same approach, using a bar through here, a slightly longer bar, or possibly this bar is almost perfect, but it's actually a little bit still on the small side. So if you had one that filled it perfectly, of course, it would be stronger, be less flexing. This was to the point where I was a little concerned that even the screwdriver might have bent permanently or possibly broken, but it didn't, and this eventually did start coming off. If I had a longer bar, it would have been more easy, but of course, it's also, that makes it easier to break the plastic handle, because primarily what I'm holding onto this with is the plastic handle or the whole thing, so it is limited on what you can do. Now let's get into the disassembly of the rest, because other people might want to disassemble the other portion because they might not actually have a problem with this. You might have a problem with something else, or you might want to just take it apart, who knows why. Okay. The biggest problem getting the rest of it off is mostly just having the correct tool. That's all. It's no special technique. So on the bottom is held on by 3 screws. Okay, they go into these 3 holes. Here, here, and here. And it's one of those triangle screws. Okay, so I did not have a triangle screwdriver. Apparently a lot of stuff nowadays comes that way. I was able to buy a kit of 6 of these triangle bits. The one that turned out to be the one that was the right size was the 2.7 millimeter. Okay, I tried measuring this as well as I could remotely to determine what would be the size that I would need, and then I ordered a kit that would have some that were a little bit bigger and some that were a little bit smaller, like this particular kit. It had a 2.7 millimeter, it had a 3 millimeter, and a 2.5 millimeter. I actually thought that the 2.5 millimeter was going to be the one that fit the best, but I was kind of just guessing. It turned out when I actually tried fitting them down into these holes to open it, it was the 2.7 that actually gave me the grip to get it out. Now, I don't know if that's the exact size here, 2.8. These screws were rusted, so in part, I had to remove some of that rust. I used a little, an awl, or I have a little tool that's just a sharp point. I cleaned it out a little bit, and the idea is you want to use the biggest possible tool that will fit. If it's too small, you don't want to round that out, run the potential danger of never getting it out. So what I used was this bit on a 1/4 inch drive. This is what I found was the cheapest way to get this, because I was able to get the kit of 6 for $9 or $10. And with this attachment, it is just long enough, for example, to fit into these access holes before running out of room. Eventually, if this will not go in, this would get wedged at a certain point. Or so it seemed, but actually now that I have it out and cleaned, it seems as though this could actually go all the way in I was concerned about that socket actually getting caught in there and then having trouble getting it out. That's not a problem. I could push it out from the inside, but before I had it disassembled, I could realize that pushing this in all the way could be a problem. Now this particular socket I have doesn't lock on, and if this is wedged in, it's somewhat hard to remove. It could potentially not come out. But based on the length of this, and I was able to measure the length here, I could tell that I would be able to make contact with the screw with this only having to go in about that far at that point. If for some reason this was separated, I would still be able to have something to grab onto to pull this out. Anyway, all of that did work, okay? Like I said, it is even possible, probably, to buy a 2.7 triangle with a longer shaft, and you wouldn't run into this particular problem of trying to actually fit that into the hole. But this actually did work, and it was cheaper because the only one I could find on a single longer shaft, it was a kit of 5, and it was $20, and honestly I don't even know if it contained the 2.7. It might not have. I actually was looking at the 2.5 at that point, but when I actually got the 2.5, it was too small. Okay, it would have risked not turning that at all. Okay, so after you get that off the bottom, the rest of it is relatively straightforward. Okay, there is a cover here which has 2 screws that go onto here. But those 2 screws are just normal hex screws, and those will come right out. Now the top piece, to get this totally apart, to really be able to look at it, you want to get this top piece off. And the key to getting the top piece off is the fact of realizing that this piece on the front is just pressed on, okay? It's snapped on. And I wasn't 100% sure that it was snapped on, but it looked to me like it might have been just snapped on. So I tried prying it off, using primarily right next to here because that's where I could get the best leverage. And sure enough, it did pop off. Fortunately, it didn't break. A lot of times you do that and it just breaks. And then mostly you're screwed up. Okay, once I got that off, there were 2 screws holding it here. These 2 screws I could previously see also because they were under this gasket. I was able to get that off. This came up. Okay, now the handle also comes apart. It's got 2 little plastic caps. And you could tell that these were going to have screws under them because you could tell they were little round circles in the middle of the handle. They pried out, not without damaging the plastic a little bit, but that's okay. Now it turns out, for what I needed, I didn't need to take this handle apart. Okay, the handle inside is the mechanism for the steam release. Okay, and that was all working fine. I didn't need to disassemble that. And to disassemble that, I probably would have had to pry this off, take the screws off, pull this apart, separate it from here. That probably could all be done. But in this case, I don't like to disassemble any more than I absolutely need to. So I wasn't needing to do that. The way that works is that pushes on this little knob here. And if you look inside here, you'll see that there's a rod that presses, and what it does is it either blocks or allows flow to the jet. So that's what this little thing here is for. Now, once this was completely disassembled, I could tell that there was a lot of rust going on here. So for example, these screws are rusted. Water has been getting in here. It's not supposed to. Another spot where you can see water getting in here quite a bit is this hose. Now fortunately, the hose is not split or anything like that. It apparently simply not watertight. Okay, I don't see any holes in it, but here's a spot where the rust is quite bad here. So whether or not this is the steam from the outside simply creating an atmosphere of steam and just rusting these, steel components or iron components that are underneath but not sealed, watertight, I don't know whether the steam is coming from the inside or the outside. I have no way to tell. I do see that in a lot of the reviews, people using this don't like it because one of the common complaints, for example, is they say steam starts shooting out the handle and it actually burns them. So this is not of the highest level of quality. So at some point in the life of this thing, it's going to start leaking. It could be at one of these joints. It's, you know, under pressure, the steam just starts coming out, either in smaller or larger amounts. You might think that it might fail here at this particular point, but I don't see any problem here. Okay, but I honestly don't know where the source of the water is, but it could have a leak that I haven't detected yet. This video is really just about the disassembly here. I'm going to now try to fill this up with water. I'll try to pressurize it, see if I can verify if it will work, maybe, or not. A few other little details about this is you can kind of, let me show you a little bit about how this works, okay? Once you've got this apart, you can verify its operation to a certain degree by simply ohming it out, okay? This is a 1600 watt device, which means it should have an 8 ohm heater. And if these terminals are the terminals that go to the heating element, okay? And the heating element is about 9 ohms, okay? And that seems fine. As I took it apart, I did notice that I had the contact on one end of the heating element had broken off, okay? When I had originally used it, it was not in that condition, but as I was playing with it, putting the vinegar in it, shaking it up, trying to dissolve the calcium buildup and what have you, there's a certain point in which it stopped working. And at that point, I did manage somehow to break it by possibly drawing too much current and having this break off. I have resoldered this on, okay? Also, in just kind of playing with it, and because these connections are not the strongest in the world, I also managed to break off the connection of one of these little Nixie tubes. I call them Nixie tubes, but that may not be the right term, but they're little discharge tubes that run off the AC voltage, and they indicate, there's one of them is red and one is green, and they're like status indicators on the front of the shark telling you if it's red, that means it's heating up, but has not yet reached its final temperature. If it's green, that means it's reached its final temperature, the heating element shuts off, and it's ready to use. At that point, you can turn it on and the spray will come out. Let me tell you how I think I probably broke this. So, because I was filling it with vinegar and discharging it, try to clean it out, what happened is I inadvertently had filled it up with water and I had it turned on, but I had this pushed down. Hold on. Pushed up, actually. Yeah, like in this position. This is the so-called open position. The way you normally would do it is you fill it with water. You would then seal it off so that no spray would come out. That would allow the pressure to build up. But I inadvertently had this in what I would call the incorrect position. But honestly, when I read the instruction manual, it honestly didn't say